My name is Darryl Lewis. I'm 59 years old, and 3 days ago, on February 11, 2026, I died. Before that afternoon, if you had asked me about my faith, I would have told you I was a good man. I went to church every Sunday. I sat in the same pew, and I tipped my hat to the pastor. But if I'm being honest, it all felt like a hollow routine. I followed the traditions because that's what men in my family did, but I didn't have a fire in my soul. I thought God was a distant judge or a Sunday obligation, someone you honored out of habit rather than love. I didn't think he really noticed a man like me. For decades, my Christianity was a jacket I wore on the weekends. It looked decent on the outside, but it didn't provide any warmth to my heart when the winds of life actually started to blow. I saw the Bible as a book of rules and church as a social club where we all pretended to be a little better than we were. I was a man of logic and work, a man who believed in what he could see and touch. I didn't realize that the most real things in this universe are the ones you cannot see with your physical eyes. I was wrong. It happened while I was out walking in the woods with my wife, Mei Ling. We were in a quiet stretch of the Appalachian forest, a place where the hemlocks grow tall and the world feels like it belongs to an older time. It's February, and the air was crisp and cold against our faces, the kind of cold that makes you feel alive in your lungs. We were just enjoying the quiet of the trees, the crunch of the frozen leaves beneath our boots. We weren't talking much. After 30 years of marriage, you don't always need words to understand one another. I remember thinking how beautiful the light looked as it filtered through the bare branches, casting long, thin shadows across the snow-dusted ground. Then, a sudden, crushing weight slammed into my chest. It didn't feel like a pain at first. It felt like a presence. It felt like an iron band was tightening around my ribs, stealing my breath and making my vision swim. I remember looking at Mei Ling, seeing the sudden terror in her eyes as she reached out for me. I wanted to tell her it was okay, to tell her not to be afraid, but my tongue felt like lead. I slumped against an old oak tree, the bark rough against my shoulder. The world turned gray, the sound of the wind in the pines faded into a distant hum, and then total darkness. There was no tunnel at first, just a deep, peaceful silence that felt like falling into a bed of feathers. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't on the forest floor anymore. The cold was gone, replaced by a warmth that seemed to radiate from within everything I looked at. I was standing in a place that felt more real than any earth I've ever walked on. It's hard to put into words, but on Earth, everything feels like it's slowly fading away. Here, everything felt like it was just beginning. The grass beneath my feet wasn't just green, it was alive with a light I'd never seen before. The air didn't just carry oxygen, it carried love. And there he was. I didn't need an introduction. The moment I saw him, my knees gave way. It wasn't because I was terrified or because I felt like I was being judged. It was because of the sheer weight of his goodness. Looking at Jesus was like finally coming home after 100 years of wandering in a desert. His eyes were the color of the deep sea and the bright sky all at once. They saw everything I had ever done, every secret thought, every selfish moment, yet they looked at me with a tenderness that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces and put it back together again in a single second. I felt a surge of shame for all the years I spent just going through the motions, all the Sundays I sat in church thinking about my lawn or my bank account instead of him. But when he looked at me, there was no anger. There was no sense that he was disappointed. He walked toward me, and even the way he moved seemed to harmonize with the music that I could now hear playing in the very atmosphere. He reached down, his hands strong and calloused like a carpenter's, and pulled me to my feet. The moment his skin touched mine, the love radiating from him washed away every regret, every sorrow, and every bit of bitterness I had ever carried. It was like a spiritual fire that burned away the dross but left the gold untouched. "Darryl," he said, and his voice sounded like the rushing of a pure mountain stream, resonant and deep, yet as intimate as a whisper in my ear. "I have brought you here to see what the world overlooks. I want to show you why your life felt the way it did. I want to show you the marks of my chosen elders, the men and women who have grown old in years, but have been forged in spirit for my highest service." I looked at him, confused. "Elders, Lord? I always thought I was just an ordinary man. I didn't think I had any special marking." He smiled, and the light in the place seemed to brighten just from the joy in his expression. The world measures greatness by what a man gathers, but I measure it by what he has survived and how he has allowed me to shape him through the fire. There are those I have set apart. They are the pillars of the unseen kingdom. They have carried burdens they didn't understand, and they have felt a loneliness that they couldn't explain. I want to show you why. He didn't just speak, he began to move, and as he walked, the landscape around us shifted. It was as if the very air became a screen, but it wasn't flat, it was three-dimensional. I wasn't just watching a vision, I was stepping into the lives of others. He took my hand, and suddenly we were standing in a small, cramped kitchen in a city I didn't recognize. An old man was sitting at a small table. There was a single crust of bread and a cup of water in front of him. The room was cold, and his coat was frayed at the sleeves. I could feel his hunger, but more than that, I could feel his peace. He wasn't complaining, he wasn't asking why, he was simply sitting in the presence of God. "Look closely, Darryl," Jesus whispered. "This is where the marking begins. The first mark of a chosen elder is the one that the world calls failure, but I call refinement. This is the elder who has seen their own strength fail completely. They have reached the end of their own ability, their own cleverness, and their own power." As I watched, I saw memories of this man's life flash by. I saw him as a younger man, successful and proud. He had built a business with his own hands. He had relied on his intellect. But then the storms came. I saw him lose his business to a partner's betrayal. I saw his health decline until he could no longer work. I saw him lose the respect of his peers. The world looked at him and felt a sense of distance, thinking he had simply been unlucky or had made poor choices. But Jesus showed me something different. I saw that in every loss, it was Jesus himself who was gently removing the things the man had relied on. I saw the man crying out in the middle of the night years ago, asking why he was being stripped bare. And then I saw the moment his heart shifted. I saw the moment he stopped fighting the loss and started embracing the one who was left. As he broke, something else began to glow inside him. It was a soft, golden light that stayed in his eyes even when his stomach was empty. Jesus looked at me and said, "A chosen elder is one who has been stripped of their own ego so that only my light remains. They are dangerous to the darkness because they have nothing left to lose on this earth. They no longer fear the loss of reputation or wealth because they have found the treasure that cannot be taken. This man's weakness is his greatest asset, for now my strength has a place to dwell without competition." We moved again, and the kitchen faded away. Now we were in a hospital waiting room. It was late, the lights were dimmed, and the only sound was the hum of the vending machines. A woman with white hair was sitting in a plastic chair, her eyes closed, her lips moving silently. She wasn't there for herself. I could see her heart, and it was like a glowing coal. "The second mark," Jesus said, "is the heart that carries the weight of the world. I call this the mark of the intercessor, the gatekeeper who stands in the doorway between heaven and earth." I felt what she was feeling, and it nearly knocked me over. It was a heavy, crushing sorrow, but it wasn't her own. She was feeling the addiction of a grandson she hadn't seen in years. She was feeling the despair of the nurse who had just walked past her. She was feeling the spiritual vacuum of the city outside the hospital walls. "She has lived a life of strange burdens," Jesus explained. "Since she was a young woman, she has cried over news reports of people she never met. She has felt a sudden urge to pray for strangers in the grocery store. People told her she was too sensitive, that she was too emotional, or that she needed to toughen up. But I gave her that heart. I gave her a portion of my own capacity to feel the pain of the fallen world. I watched a vision of her life. I saw her at 30, at 40, at 50. Always, she was the one people came to with their troubles, and she would listen until her own soul felt heavy. I saw her kneeling by her bed at 3 a.m, her face wet with tears, groaning for a breakthrough in a family she barely knew. Chosen elders like her are the spiritual walls of their communities. Jesus said, "They are the ones who keep the darkness from completely overwhelming the homes of the distracted and the cold-hearted. They carry the sins of their neighborhoods to my feet, and they ask for mercy when no one else is even thinking of me. The world doesn't see them, and often their own families don't understand why they are so heavy-hearted." But in heaven, she is a general. Her tears are recorded in my scrolls as victories. She is a gatekeeper, and because she watches, others are safe. The light around Jesus seemed to pulse with a rhythm, like a heartbeat made of gold. He looked at me, and I felt as though he were reading the very pages of my soul, seeing the times I had felt like an outsider, even in my own home. He began to walk again, and I followed him through a shimmering veil of light that tasted like the morning air after a storm. We found ourselves standing in the middle of a bustling town square. It looked like a Saturday morning in a busy place. People were rushing from store to store, carrying bags, laughing, talking, and checking their watches. In the middle of it all stood a man named William Thompson. He was about my age, maybe a few years older. He was dressed neatly, but there was something about him that made him stand out, though not in a way that drew people to him. He was standing near a fountain, just observing. People brushed past him as if he were made of glass. He looked like he wanted to join in, but there was a visible barrier between him and the crowd. "Observe him, Darryl," Jesus said softly. The third mark of a chosen elder is the mark of holy distinction. The world calls this loneliness or social awkwardness, but it is actually a divine separation. This man has lived a life of feeling like a foreigner in his own land. He has sat at holiday tables and felt like a guest who wasn't quite understood. He has joined committees and groups, only to find that his heart was tuned to a frequency no one else could hear. I watched a vision of William's younger years. I saw him as a young man trying to be one of the guys, but the jokes they told felt flat to him. I saw him in middle age, trying to climb the ladder of success, but the hunger for more money or a bigger house felt like ash in his mouth. He was always the one who wandered away from the party to look at the stars or to sit in silence. "I have kept him on the outskirts on purpose," Jesus explained. "When I choose an elder for my inner court, I must first wean them off the applause of men. If they are too comfortable in the world, they will begin to think like the world. If they are always surrounded by the noise of the crowd, they will lose the ability to hear the still, small voice that speaks in the desert. This isolation is not a punishment, though it often feels like one. It is an insulation. I am protecting him from the common thinking that would dilute the message I am writing in his heart. He is a stranger because his true home is where we are standing right now." I felt a wave of relief. I thought about the times I had felt like a ghost at my own family reunions, watching everyone talk about things that seemed so small and temporary, while my heart was searching for something deep and eternal. I always thought there was something wrong with me, that maybe I was just a cold or distant person. But Jesus was saying it was a gift. The world treats the elderly as if they are becoming invisible, Jesus said, his voice tinged with a beautiful, holy authority. But in my kingdom, those who have been made invisible to the world are the ones I am most clearly looking at. Their separation is their training. It is in that quiet space where no one else is looking that I forge their character. Suddenly, the town square dissolved into a scene that felt much colder and sharper. We were standing in a small, traditional church building. It looked like the kind of place I grew up in. White pews, stained glass, and the smell of old hymnals and floor wax. But the atmosphere was thick with tension. I saw a woman named Darryl Lewis, no relation to me, but she had the same kind of steady, quiet strength. She was sitting in a pew near the front, her head bowed. Behind her, a group of people were whispering. Their faces were twisted with judgment. I could hear their words drifting through the air like smoke. They were questioning her motives, mocking her devotion, and spreading stories that weren't true. They were calling her haughty because she spent so much time in prayer, and strange because she didn't join in their gossip. The fourth mark, Jesus said, and his eyes burned with a protective fire, is the mark of the target. A chosen elder is not someone who lives a life of constant peace and ease. In fact, it is often the opposite. Because they carry my light, they attract the shadows. The enemy of souls is not worried about those who are spiritually asleep. He doesn't waste his arrows on those who are walking in the same direction he is. He targets the one who is waking up. He targets the one who carries the oil of my spirit. He showed me visions of Catherine's life. I saw her being betrayed by her closest friend. I saw her facing a health crisis that made no sense. I saw her being passed over for positions she was qualified for, simply because someone didn't like her spirit. She has faced warfare that was unprovoked, Jesus said. She has been attacked not because she did something wrong, but because she was doing everything right. The brighter the lamp burns, the more the moths will beat against it. This elder has learned that the resistance she faces is actually a confirmation of her calling. She has learned to stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and instead say, "I must be carrying something very valuable if the enemy is trying this hard to steal it." I saw Catherine look up toward the cross at the front of the church. Even with the whispers behind her and the pain in her body, a small, knowing smile played on her lips. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry at the people behind her. She seemed to look right through the physical world and see the spiritual battle that was raging. A chosen elder knows that their battle is not against flesh and blood, Jesus continued. They have reached a maturity where they can bless those who curse them, because they realize those people are merely being used as tools in a much larger conflict. This mark, this spiritual resistance, is what develops the thick skin and the soft heart. Without the heat of the battle, the steel of their soul would never be tempered. They are my warriors, Darryl. They don't look like soldiers to the world. They look like tired old men and women. But in the spirit realm, they are covered in armor and they hold the line when others run. We stood there for a moment, and I felt the weight of the warfare Catherine had endured. It made my own heart attack in the woods seem like just one more chapter in a long story of testing. I realized that all the times I had been criticized for my traditional ways, or all the times I had been treated unfairly at work, it wasn't just bad luck. It was a test of my staying power. "Do not fear the arrows, Darryl," Jesus said, looking at me with a gaze that gave me a strength I've never known. "The arrows are proof that you are in the fight. The enemy only tries to stop those who are actually moving toward my heart. If you aren't meeting any resistance, it might be because you aren't a threat. But the elders I have chosen are threats to every dark stronghold on this earth." The church scene began to fade, and the light grew softer, shifting from the sharp glare of the sanctuary into something more ancient and vast. I could feel that we were moving deeper into the mystery of why some people are called to walk such a difficult, narrow path as they grow older. The scenery began to bleed away into a soft, hazy gold, like the light that hangs over a meadow just before the sun dips below the horizon. The sharp edges of the church and the cold whispers of the people were replaced by a profound, heavy silence. It wasn't the kind of silence that feels empty. It was the kind of silence that feels full of secrets, like a library at midnight or a forest after a fresh snowfall. Jesus turned to me, and I noticed that his presence seemed to expand, filling up the space with a sense of ancient authority. The fifth mark, Darryl, is the one that allows the elder to become a true vessel of my counsel. It is the mark of the seasoned tongue. In a world that is obsessed with being heard, I have taught my chosen ones the power of being still. Suddenly, we were standing in a rustic community hall. It was filled with people, farmers, local businessmen, young families. There was a heated argument going on about a piece of land or a town decision. Voices were raised, faces were flushed, and everyone was talking over one another. It was a storm of noise, each person trying to assert their will through the sheer volume of their words. But in the corner sat an older man named Samuel. He was leaning on a gnarled wooden cane, his eyes moving slowly from face to face. He didn't interrupt. He didn't sigh in frustration. He just listened. I could see his heart, and it was like a deep, still well. While everyone else was reacting to the surface noise, Samuel was listening to the spirit behind the words. He was discerning the fear and the greed that were driving the argument. "Watch him," Jesus whispered. After nearly an hour of chaos, the room finally went quiet. The energy of the crowd spent. Someone turned to Samuel and asked, "Well, Sam, what do you think?" The old man didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch out until it felt uncomfortable, until the room was forced to settle. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but it had a vibration to it that seemed to vibrate in the very floorboards. He spoke one sentence, a simple observation about the value of the community over the value of the profit. It wasn't a complex argument, it was a revelation. The room went dead silent. The anger evaporated. It was as if a cool breeze had just blown through a feverish room. A chosen elder has had their tongue trained in the school of the desert, Jesus said as the vision of the hall began to fade. They have spent years speaking when no one listened or being silenced when they had much to say. Through that frustration, I taught them to stop wasting their breath. They have learned that words are seeds, and you do not scatter seeds on frozen ground. They wait for the soil to be turned by life itself. When they speak, they do not speak from their own opinion or their own intellect. They speak what they have heard me say in the secret place. He showed me another vision, one from a different time. It was an elderly woman sitting on a porch in a small mountain village. A young girl was crying at her feet, heartbroken over a betrayal. The woman didn't offer cliches. She didn't tell the girl to just pray about it or get over it. She simply reached out and held the girl's hand, her own eyes reflecting a deep, knowing peace. She waited until the girl's breathing slowed, and then she told a story. Not about the girl's problem, but about the faithfulness of God in her own life 50 years prior. The world thinks wisdom is having an answer for everything, Jesus continued, his hand resting on my shoulder. But my chosen elders know that true wisdom is often found in the space between words. They have learned to hold their peace when they are accused. They have learned to keep a secret when it would be profitable to share it. Their tongue is a rudder that can steer a whole ship through a storm, but only because they have allowed me to take the helm. This mark is one of great weight. It means people will often come to them with their darkest secrets and their heaviest questions, and the elder must have the strength to hold those things without letting them leak out into the world. I thought about my own life, about all the times I had jumped into arguments just to prove I was right. I thought about the times I had used my words to sharpen my own image instead of to heal someone else. I felt a pang of regret, but Jesus squeezed my shoulder, and the feeling was replaced by a desire to learn this holy quiet. Darryl, he said, the elders I am calling in these final days are those who have stopped trying to convince the world of their value. They are content to be silent until I prompt them, and when they do open their mouth, the kingdom of darkness trembles, because those words are backed by decades of walking with me through the valley. They don't give advice, they give life. The gold light began to shift again, turning into a deep, warm amber. I felt a shift in the weight of the visions. We were moving away from the internal marks and towards something that felt like an altar. The air grew thicker with the scent of frankincense and rain. Now, Jesus said, his face becoming solemn yet radiant, we come to the mark that many find the hardest to carry as they reach their later years. It is the mark of the burnt offering. Suddenly, the visions became more personal, reflecting the lives of people who had given everything away until there was nothing left but the essence of who they were. I saw an old man who had spent his retirement savings to help a local orphanage, not out of a sense of duty, but out of a burning love that he couldn't contain. I saw a grandmother who spent her final days of strength raising children that weren't her own, her body aching, her own dreams long ago set aside. The world tells you that your later years are for you, Jesus said, and there was a touch of sadness in his voice for those who believe the lie. They tell you it is a time to retreat, to indulge, to focus only on your own comfort. But my chosen elders know that the fire on the altar must never go out. They have reached a point where they realize their life is not a possession to be guarded, but a gift to be poured out. They have become a bridge. They stand with one foot in the old world and one foot in the new, allowing the younger ones to walk across their backs to reach the places they themselves will never see. I saw a vision of a man I recognized from my own childhood, a man named Mr. Henderson. He had been a quiet fixture in our town, always fixing things for people, always showing up when a fence was down or a roof was leaking. I saw him in this vision, much older than I remembered him. He was tired. His hands were gnarled with arthritis. Yet he was sitting in a dusty garage teaching a group of fatherless boys how to work with wood. He wasn't just teaching them a trade, he was teaching them how to be men of integrity. He was pouring his very life force into them. knowing he wouldn't be around to see the men they would become. He is a burnt offering, Jesus said softly. He has consumed his own life in the service of my fire. To the world, he looks like he's being used up. They might even look at him with a sense of distance, wondering why he doesn't just rest. But I see a sacrifice that is sweet-smelling. These elders have surrendered the right to their own time, their own money, and their own legacy. They don't care if their name is on a building. They only care if my name is written on the hearts of the children they leave behind. This mark is the sign of a soul that has completely moved past the need for self-preservation. I watched as Mr. Henderson finished his lesson and sat down, wiping the sweat from his brow. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were shining with a light that didn't come from the light bulbs in the garage. It was a light from another world. When you were young, Darryl, you lived for yourself, even when you thought you were living for me, Jesus said, looking directly into my eyes. But as you grow into a chosen elder, you lose the self and you find the all. You become like the grain of wheat that falls into the earth and dies so that it can produce a harvest. The elders who carry this mark are the ones who hold the spiritual foundations of the world together. They are the reason the next generation still has a path to follow, even when the world is trying to wash every path away. The amber light didn't just glow, it seemed to thicken, becoming like a liquid warmth that we were wading through. It was a heavy, comforting atmosphere that smelled of cedar and old books. Jesus looked at me, and I could see the reflection of entire lifetimes in his eyes. I felt a sense of profound reverence, a realization that I was standing before the one who had watched every sunrise since the dawn of time. "Darryl," he said, his voice vibrating through my chest, "the world sees the aging process as a slow descent into uselessness. They think that as the body slows down, the spirit must also fade. But in my kingdom, the opposite is true. As the outer man perishes, the inner man is being renewed day by day. I want you to see how the sacrifice of a chosen elder looks when no one is watching, when there are no cameras, no applause, and no one to say, 'Thank you.'" Suddenly, the golden haze cleared, and we were standing in a kitchen that felt ancient. The walls were made of rough-hewn logs, and a small fire crackled in a stone hearth. It was bitingly cold outside. I could see the frost thick on the window panes. But inside, there was a singular focus. An old woman, her back bent like a bow, was kneeling on the hard floor. Her hands were gnarled, the joints swollen with the years of hard labor in the fields. She was peeling a few small potatoes, her movements slow and deliberate. "This is Sarah," Jesus whispered. "She has lived in these mountains for 80 years. She lost her husband 40 years ago, and her children have moved far away to the cities. To her neighbors, she is just a quiet old woman who keeps to herself. They think she has lived out, a relic of a time gone by." I watched as Sarah finished her meager task. She didn't sit down to eat. Instead, she took the small bowl of food, wrapped it in a clean cloth, and began to put on a heavy, tattered coat. She picked up a wooden staff and stepped out into the biting wind. I followed Jesus as we walked beside her. She struggled with every step, her breath coming in ragged gasps of white vapor. She walked nearly a mile through the snow to a small shack where a young mother sat shivering with two small children. Sarah handed over the food, offered a few quiet words of encouragement that I couldn't quite hear, and then turned around to walk back into the cold. "She is a burnt offering," Jesus said, his voice thick with emotion. "She has no surplus. She gives from her lack. Every step she took in that snow was a prayer. She didn't do it because she felt good. She did it because she has become the hands and feet of my mercy. She has reached a place where her own comfort is a secondary thought. She is a bridge for that young mother, a sign that they are not forgotten by heaven. Sarah is a chosen elder because she has allowed her life to be consumed by the needs of the small and the weak. She carries the mark of the sacrifice, and in heaven, her name is shouted with honor." The vision shifted again. Now we were in a sterile, white hallway of a nursing home. The air was heavy with the smell of floor wax and medicine. It was late at night, and most of the residents were asleep. We walked into a room where a man named Arthur lay in a bed. He was thin, his skin like parchment. He couldn't move his legs, and his speech was mostly gone. To the nurses who checked on him, he was just the man in 304. But as I looked at Arthur, I saw something that took my breath away. From his chest, a pillar of light was rising, piercing through the ceiling and into the heavens. He was awake, his eyes fixed on the corner of the room. He was praying. He wasn't praying for himself, for his healing, or for his release from that bed. He was praying for the world. I saw visions of people in far-off lands, people in high positions of power, and children in orphanages, all of them being touched by the light that was flowing out of Arthur's spirit. Arthur has been in this bed for 10 years, Jesus said, and I saw him reach out and gently stroke the man's white hair. To the world, his life is a tragedy. They look at him with a sense of distance, wondering why a man would have to endure such a long, quiet ending. But Arthur is not at an ending. He is at his peak. Because he can no longer move his body, he has learned to move the heavens. He is a master of the spirit. He has surrendered his right to a normal retirement so that he can be a full-time guardian of the light. He is my secret weapon in this place. The staff here wonders why the atmosphere of this wing is so peaceful, why the angry patients calm down when they pass his door. It is because of the mark he carries. The mark of the one who has been poured out until only the spirit remains. Arthur's eyes seemed to flicker toward us for a second, and a look of such intense joy passed over his face that I felt like I was looking at a burning sun. He knew Jesus was there. He knew his work was being seen. "Darryl," Jesus said, turning back to me, "the world fears the loss of independence. They think that being dependent on others is a shame. But for my chosen elders, dependency is often the final gate to true power. When you can do nothing for yourself, you finally learn what it means to let me do everything through you." Arthur is more effective in this bed than he ever was when he was running his business. He has become a pure channel. The nursing home faded, and the amber light began to swirl, turning into a deep, vibrant violet. It felt like the color of royalty, but also the color of a deep bruise. I felt a sense of transition, as if we were moving toward the final revelation. "Now," Jesus said, his expression turning from solemnity to a brilliant, infectious joy, "we come to the 7th mark. This is the mark that proves the enemy has utterly failed. It is the mark that turns the trials into triumphs. It is the mark of the unending song." Suddenly I heard it. It wasn't a physical sound at first. It was a frequency that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. It was a melody that was both ancient and brand new. It sounded like the wind through the pines, the crashing of the ocean, and the laughter of a child, all woven into one perfect harmony. "Look," Jesus commanded. I saw a vision of a woman named Elena. She was standing in a small garden behind a modest house. She had just received news that would have crushed most people: a diagnosis, a financial loss, and the death of a friend, all within the same week. I could see the shadows of grief and fear trying to wrap themselves around her heart. They were like dark vines, pulling at her, trying to drag her down into the dirt of despair. But then, Elena did something unexpected. She didn't scream and she didn't collapse. She took a deep breath and she began to hum. It was a soft, steady sound. As she hummed, the dark vines began to wither. She began to sing. Her voice cracked and thin with age, but filled with a defiance that was terrifying to the darkness. She was singing about the goodness of God. She was singing about the beauty of the morning. She was singing a song that had no end. The 7th mark, Jesus said, his own voice joining the melody in the air, is the joy that cannot be explained by circumstances. It is a holy rebellion. A chosen elder has seen enough of life to know that the storms always come, but they have also seen enough of me to know that I am the master of the storm. They have learned to sing in the middle of the rain, not because they like being wet, but because they know the sun is still behind the clouds. This joy is a weapon. Darryl, the enemy can handle a man who is angry or a man who is sad, but he cannot handle an elder who is joyful in the face of loss. It makes him realize that he has no power over them. I watched Elena as she walked through her garden and touching the leaves of her plants, her song never wavering. She looked like a queen in a worn-out apron. I realized that the song wasn't coming from her throat. It was coming from a spring deep within her that had been dug out by the years of suffering. The violet light began to swirl and deepen, becoming so thick it felt like I was standing in the middle of a celestial sunset. The sound of the melody I had heard around Elena didn't fade. Instead, it began to layer, as if thousands of voices were joining in from across the centuries. It wasn't a loud noise, but it was a powerful one, the kind of sound that makes the earth feel small and the heavens feel vast. Jesus led me further into this violet haze, and we emerged in a place that looked like a jagged stone quarry. It was a bleak, gray landscape where men were forced to break rocks under a scorching sun. It looked like a scene from a hard, forgotten history. Among the workers, I saw an elder named Elias. He was thin, his ribs showing through his skin, and his hands were a map of scars and calluses. He was moving slower than the younger men, and the guards often shouted at him, but Elias didn't flinch. Every time his hammer hit the stone, I heard a soft, rhythmic hum coming from his chest. It wasn't a song of protest, and it wasn't a song of despair. It was a song of presence. I watched as the younger men around him, who were full of rage and bitterness, began to synchronize their breathing with Elias's humming. The atmosphere of the quarry began to shift. The bitterness didn't vanish, but it lost its sharp edge. "Look at his spirit, Darryl," Jesus said, his voice a warm anchor in the middle of that harsh vision. "Elias has every reason to curse the day he was born. He has been stripped of his freedom, his family, and his health. But he carries the seventh mark, the one that makes the enemy flee in confusion. He has discovered that joy is not a feeling you have when things go well. It is a choice you make when everything falls apart. He is singing a song that the guards cannot hear with their ears, but their spirits feel it. They can chain his body, but they cannot chain his melody." I saw a guard walk up to Elias and strike him for moving too slowly. Elias fell to his knees, but as he pushed himself back up, the hum didn't stop. In fact, it grew slightly louder, becoming a low, resonant chant of praise. I saw the guard hesitate, a look of confusion and almost fear crossing his face. He didn't know how to handle a man who wouldn't break. "This is the mark of a chosen elder who has reached the summit of the mountain," Jesus continued. "They have passed through the refinement. They have stood as gatekeepers. They have endured the isolation and the arrows, and they have offered their lives as a sacrifice. And at the end of it all, they find this, an unshakable, defiant joy. It is the final proof that the world has no more hooks in them. There is nothing left for the enemy to grab onto. When an elder reaches this place, they become a beacon for the entire kingdom. They show the younger ones that it is possible to survive the fire and come out singing." The quarry dissolved, and we were standing in a modern living room. It was cluttered with the remnants of a life. Old photos, half-finished knitting, a stack of bills on the desk. An elderly man named David was sitting in a recliner looking at a photo of his late wife. I could feel his grief. It was like a deep, cold ocean. But as I watched, David began to speak to the empty room. He wasn't talking to himself, he was talking to God. He began to list things he was thankful for. Small things. The way the light hit the oak tree outside, the taste of his coffee, the memory of his wife's laugh. As he spoke, the cold ocean of grief didn't disappear, but a light began to shine through the water. David began to whistle a soft tune, a simple hymn from his childhood. The shadows in the corners of the room, which had seemed heavy and oppressive, began to retreat. "The world thinks that joy is the absence of sorrow," Jesus said, stepping closer to David and placing a hand on the old man's slumped shoulder. "But the joy of a chosen elder is the ability to carry sorrow and praise in the same hand." David is not pretending he isn't lonely. He isn't hiding from his pain. He is simply refusing to let the pain have the final word. This seventh mark is the seal of my victory in a human soul. It is the moment when the elder realizes that because I live, they live also, and that every loss is merely a temporary delay in an eternal reunion. I felt a surge of understanding. All my life, I had chased happiness, thinking it was something I would find if I just worked hard enough or had a good enough family. But what I was seeing here was something completely different. It was a power. It was a spiritual weight that could anchor a soul in the middle of a hurricane. "Darryl," Jesus said, turning his gaze back to me, "many people grow old and become bitter. They count their regrets like beads on a string. They talk about what used to be and what they lost. But my chosen elders are different. They don't look backward with longing. They look forward with anticipation. They have the mark of the song because they can already hear the music of the world to come. They are like people who have been traveling through a dark tunnel for a long time and have finally spotted the light at the end. They don't care about the darkness behind them anymore. They are too busy staring at the light. He showed me a vision of a crowded city street. Amidst the thousands of people rushing by, I saw an old woman sitting on a park bench. She was dressed simply, and she was just watching the world. But she had a smile on her face that was so bright it seemed to illuminate the sidewalk around her. People would walk by, stressed and angry, and they would catch a glimpse of her face. I saw their footsteps slow. I saw some of them frown in confusion. Then a small smile would tug at the corners of their own mouths. She was a silent broadcaster of heaven's peace. She doesn't have a pulpit, Jesus said. She doesn't have a book. She has nothing but her joy. And yet she is doing more for my kingdom on that bench than 1,000 loud voices. She is a witness to the fact that I am enough. When a young person sees an elder who is truly joyful, it gives them hope that they can survive their own life. It tells them that there is a destination worth reaching. This is why I protect this mark so fiercely. It is the most beautiful thing an elder can carry. The violet light began to pulse faster, and I felt a sense of urgency, as if the time for visions was drawing to a close. The melody grew more complex, more triumphant. I saw visions of elders in hospitals, in prisons, in beautiful homes, and in dusty huts, all of them marked by these 7 traits. I saw them as a great army, not of soldiers with swords, but of pillars with hearts of fire. I have shown you these things so you would understand that your life was never random, Jesus said. The chest pain in the woods, the years of feeling out of place, the times you were criticized for your faith, it was all the hand of the potter on the clay. You are being shaped into an elder of the inner court. But you must go back, Darryl. You must tell them that the aging process is not a tragedy to be feared, but a coronation to be celebrated. Tell them to look for the marks. Tell them that when they feel the pressure, it is only because I am pressing my signet ring into their soul to claim them as my own. I felt a sudden, overwhelming desire to stay. I wanted to be part of that song forever. I wanted to melt into the violet light and never have to breathe the heavy, cold air of earth again. But as I looked at Jesus, I saw a reflection of Mei Ling's face in his eyes. I saw the grief she was feeling at that very moment, sitting in a hospital room, holding a hand that felt cold. "Go," Jesus whispered, and his voice was both a command and a blessing. "Tell them they are chosen." The violet light began to pull back like a receding tide, revealing a final, breathtaking expanse. It wasn't just a single scene anymore. It was as if the walls of time and space had been knocked down. I saw a vast, shimmering tapestry of light stretching across the horizon, and within that tapestry were thousands upon thousands of individual sparks. Jesus gestured toward the horizon. "Every spark you see, Darryl, is one of my chosen elders. They are the stars I have placed in the firmament of the human story to keep the night from becoming absolute. Look at the variety, look at the depth of the work I have done in them." As I looked, individual faces began to emerge from the light, each one telling a story of a life marked by heaven. I saw Julian Vance, a man who had spent 40 years working in a coal mine, his body broken and his lungs heavy. In his retirement, he didn't complain about the hardness of his life. Instead, I saw him standing at the edge of his small town, watching the sunrise every morning and blessing every person who drove past his house on their way to work. He didn't know their names, but he knew they were carrying burdens, and he used his final years to speak peace over them. He carried the mark of the gatekeeper and the refined vessel. He was a pillar that the town didn't even know it had. I saw Rosemary Clark, an elderly woman living in a busy apartment complex. She was often ignored by the young professionals rushing past her door. But Jesus showed me the inside of her apartment. It was a sanctuary. Every wall was covered with photos of people she had met throughout her life. Old friends, distant relatives, even the delivery person who brought her groceries. She spent her days walking from photo to photo, laying her hands on the frames and asking for the grace of God to sustain them. To the world, she was a lonely woman in a small flat. To the heavens, she was a mighty intercessor, a bridge of light connecting those people to the throne of grace. She carried the mark of the sacrifice and the holy distinction. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with an ancient burning pride. The world looks for power in the hands of the young and the ambitious. They think that influence is found in how many people follow you or how much wealth you control. But I find my power in the hearts of those who have been seasoned by time and trials. I find my influence in the quiet prayers of the one who has no one left to talk to but me. These elders are the ones who hold back the floods of judgment. They are the ones who preserve the ancient paths so that the children do not lose their way entirely. I saw a vision of Gordon Fletcher, an elder who had faced a lifetime of being misunderstood. He was a man of deep thought and few words, often dismissed as slow or unimportant. I watched as he stood in a meeting where people were shouting and making foolish decisions based on greed. Gordon stood up, and for the first time in an hour, the room went silent. He didn't argue. He simply told a story about a drought he had lived through as a boy and the lesson his father had taught him about patience. The wisdom in his voice was so thick you could almost touch it. He carried the mark of the seasoned tongue. He didn't need to shout. The truth in his spirit did the work for him. Then I saw Beatrice Lang, a woman who had lost everything in a fire late in her life, her home, her memories, and her sense of security. I saw her standing in the ashes, her white hair blowing in the wind. But instead of cursing the sky, she was singing. She was singing a song of praise she had learned in Sunday school 70 years prior. People gathered around her, amazed by her strength. She wasn't strong because she was brave. She was strong because she was anchored. She carried the mark of the unending song. She showed everyone who saw her that you can lose everything you own and still be the richest person in the world if you have the presence of God. Darryl, Jesus said, his voice becoming as steady as a heartbeat, you asked why you felt the crushing weight in the forest. You asked why your life felt like a series of departures and closed doors. It was so I could prepare you to carry these marks. I had to let your heart fail so that you would know I am your only life. I had to let the forest grow quiet so you would learn to hear me. I had to let you feel like a stranger so you would seek your true citizenship in my kingdom. I saw a vision of my own life from a perspective I'd never had. I saw the moments when I felt invisible at work, the times I felt the sting of a cold word from someone I loved, and the nights I sat on my porch wondering if I had made any difference at all. In every one of those moments, I saw a golden thread weaving through the shadows. Jesus was there. He was the one who was closing the doors. He was the one who was thinning the crowds around me. He was the one who was teaching me to be still. You are a chosen elder, Darryl Lewis, he said. And as he spoke my name, I felt a surge of energy that made my spirit feel younger than it had ever been. You are not an accident of biology or a victim of time. You are a vessel of honor. The marks you carry are not scars of shame. They are your credentials for the work ahead. You have been tested, and you have stayed the course. You have been wounded, and you have allowed me to heal you. Now, you must go back and be a father to the fatherless. You must be a witness to the light. You must show the world that the ending of a life can be more glorious than its beginning. The vision of the tapestry began to pull away, and the violet light grew so bright it felt like it was dissolving the very essence of my being. I saw a final glimpse of an army of elders, thousands of them, including Julian, Rosemary, Gordon, Beatrice, and so many others whose names I would never know on earth. They were standing together, a wall of light against the darkness. I felt a profound sense of belonging. I wasn't just a man from Pennsylvania who had a heart attack. I was a part of something eternal. Tell them, Darryl, Jesus whispered, and his voice seemed to follow me as I felt myself being pulled backward through a tunnel of warmth. Tell the ones who are tired that their strength is being renewed. Tell the ones who are lonely that I am their constant companion. Tell the ones who are attacked that I am their shield. And tell everyone that the marks of a chosen elder are the most beautiful things I have ever created. I felt a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The warmth vanished, replaced by the sterile, cold air of a hospital room. I felt the weight of my physical body again, the ache in my chest, the stiffness in my limbs, the heaviness of the air in my lungs. I heard the steady, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. I opened my eyes and saw the white ceiling tiles, the fluorescent lights, and the pale blue curtains. I wake up today, February 14th, 2026, in a hospital bed in Pittsburgh. Tom, or rather the people I thought I knew, have been replaced by the reality of my wife, Mei Ling, sitting next to me. She is holding my hand, her eyes red from crying, but when she sees me look at her, a look of such pure joy breaks across her face that I am reminded of the light I saw in that other place. The doctors say I was clinically dead for several minutes out there under that oak tree. They use words like recovery and survival, but I know those words are too small for what really happened. I didn't just survive, I was reborn. I look at my hands, they are wrinkled, spotted with age, and the veins are prominent. 3 days ago, I might have looked at these hands with a sense of regret, seeing them as symbols of my fading strength. But today I see them differently. I see them as the hands of a chosen elder. I see the marks. I feel the weight of the intercession I am called to. I feel the stillness of the seasoned tongue. I feel the defiance of the unending song rising in my heart. I know now that I wasn't sent back to just finish my days in quiet retirement. I was sent back to be a voice. I was sent back to tell every man and woman who feels the weight of their years that they are not being discarded, they are being prepared. You are not broken by the years, you are being built by them. The isolation you feel is the sanctuary of the king. The attacks you face are the tributes of a defeated enemy. The sorrow you carry is the fuel for a prayer that can change the world. If you are an elder and you are reading this or hearing this, know that heaven sees every gray hair as a silver thread in a royal robe. Do not apologize for your age and do not shrink back from your calling. The world may look past you, but the Lord of glory is looking right at you. You are a pillar. You are a gatekeeper. You are a burnt offering. You are a song that the world desperately needs to hear. You are not just old, you are marked. And because you are marked, you are chosen.